Hey guys, welcome to StudyIQ. My name is Prashant Dhawan and in this video we are going to analyze the ASEAN 2017 Summit. In this video, first of all, we will talk about the country where the ASEAN Summit took place. Then we will talk about the summit itself, what happened during the summit and what were the important pacts that were signed, what was India's role, what our Prime Minister did during the ASEAN Summit. We will discuss that. Finally, we will also discuss what is the importance of ASEAN in the geopolitical scenario. Let's start. StudyIQ's pendrive and tablet courses are available for various exams like SSC exam, bank exam, UPSC, DSSB, CLAT. Various exam courses are available on StudyIQ.com and you can go here. We also have a chat option that will help you in your purchase. You can also call these numbers that you see on the screen. ASEAN, I think most of you probably know the full form of this acronym. It is Association of Southeast Asian Nations. If you have a look at the world map, you will notice that all the 10 ASEAN members are located in the Southeast Asian part of the world. So that's why they call themselves an Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And as I told you, there are 10 ASEAN countries and the ASEAN group has recently completed 50 years. It has been in existence for 50 years now. But this 2017 ASEAN Summit was the 31st summit. So don't confuse that. Alright, this is the 31st summit, but ASEAN as a group has completed 50 years. And this time around, the ASEAN Summit took place in Philippines. It is a country in Southeast Asia, very near the South China Sea. Now the theme of this year's ASEAN Summit, the 2017 ASEAN Summit, was Partnering for Change, Engaging the World. Please make sure to remember the theme of this year's ASEAN Summit, as they might ask this in any exam like CGL, UPSC. It's quite an important thing. Now, a very important question can be, sir, why do we have such summits anyway? What's the point of having an ASEAN Summit? Well, it gives the 10 member countries a good opportunity to come together for ASEAN policy making. ASEAN Summit is a very important tool for the policy making of the ASEAN nations. They come together, they sign pacts, they talk about the future of the group. Other than that, leaders from around the world like the Prime Minister of India, President of US, the Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister of Russia, even they get an opportunity to come to the ASEAN or the host country, and they talk to the ASEAN country leaders, and even they try to engage with the ASEAN countries, try to build better economic ties with them. So basically it is a platform where the ASEAN countries can deepen their engagement with each other, and also the rest of the world can deepen its engagement with the ASEAN countries. Now if we look at the glorious map of Asia, you can see here is our lovely country India. If we start swimming from India and start swimming all the way down south, we have to first go through the Bay of Bengal, then the Strait of Malacca. Here is the Strait of Malacca, because as you can see, this is Malacca right here. And after crossing the Strait of Malacca, we will have to go through the Borneo Island, and then finally we will reach Philippines. It is quite an interesting country. Do you know what is the dominant religion in Philippines? It is Christianity. A lot of people think that it is a Buddhist country, but around 95 or 94% of the people in Philippines, they are Christians and they are quite religious. And as you can see, this is Manila, the capital of Philippines, one of the most densely populated cities in the world, very crowded. And this is where the 2017 ASEAN Summit is taking place. Now, some of the other things that you should probably know about the host country Philippines is that it is situated in the Western Pacific Ocean, and it basically consists of thousands of islands, 7,641 islands to be precise, and most of these islands are uninhabited. And the capital city, as I told you, of Philippines is Manila. And the president, you really should know about the president of Philippines. He's a very controversial figure and he's in the news a lot. His name is Rodrigo Duterte, and he has waged a war on drugs in his country Philippines, and because of that thousands of people have died. Some even say that a lot of human rights have been violated, and not a lot of world leaders have stepped up on the ASEAN platform to actually condemn Philippines or talk about the human rights violations with the president Rodrigo Duterte. People expected Donald Trump to raise the issue of human rights in Philippines, but even he preferred not to do that. Now, other than all of this, if you are preparing for a high level exam like UPSC or perhaps even SBI PO, the mains exam, then you should probably know that the MS Summit was also held in Manila. Now, since the ASEAN Summit was held, all the other summits that were held in Philippines are important as well. You should probably know about them. Now, what do I mean by the CMS Summit? I'm talking about the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. Alright, so basically this is a convention that works on the conservation of species, animals that migrate. You know, a lot of animals, they like to migrate from one part of the world to the other part of the world when the season changes. So basically there are conference of parties of this convention around the world every single year. This time around in 2017, the conference of parties was held in Manila. Alright, so make sure you remember this. The 12th COP of the Convention of the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals was held in Philippines, Manila. If you're preparing for UPSC, you should probably write this down. Now, I would also like to mention that the Convention of Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals has a headquarters as well. They are headquartered at Bonn, Germany, and this is under United Nations, so it is quite important. Now, let's have a look at all the 10 ASEAN countries. Now, you need to know about the ASEAN countries. Perhaps you can develop some kind of a trick to memorize all the names. People make all kinds of tricks. So first of all, Indonesia is part of it, Thailand is, Philippines is, Malaysia is, Singapore. Now these 5 countries were basically the founding members of the ASEAN group. The ASEAN group was founded in 1967. Alright, that's why since it is 2017 now, it has been in existence for 50 years, which is a great thing. Now if we look at all the ASEAN countries, the 10 ASEAN countries, you will notice that their nominal GDP isn't all that exceptional. Just have a look at it. Thailand's nominal GDP is around $400 billion, perhaps a little more than that. That's impressive, but not all that great. Similarly, if you look at Vietnam, roughly around $215 billion. Alright, but if all these countries stand together under the banner of ASEAN, then their combined nominal GDP rivals that of a regional superpower like India. Yes, I use the term regional power. Some might disagree with me, but I prefer to use it. Now, India's GDP is a little more than $2.4 trillion in terms of nominal GDP. I'm not talking about the PPP, People's Purchasing Power. Even if you look at the People's Purchasing Power, then they are not very far behind India in terms of PPP. Now, are they? India's GDP in terms of PPP is roughly around $9 trillion. So clearly, when all these 10 countries, they stand together as ASEAN countries, then they create a huge market, a huge economy overall in terms of nominal and PPP GDP. And they basically attract a lot of investors from around the world. They have the potential to grow into a much more powerful and influential group in the world, akin to the European Union perhaps. Now let's have a look at the origin of the Southeast Asian nations, ASEAN. Well, ASEAN is a regional grouping that was founded on 8 August 1967 by Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand and Philippines. Now, as I told you earlier in this slide, you can see these 5 countries were the founding members, and later on Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos and Brunei, they came in and joined the party. A similar case can be seen in the BRICS nations, where initially the group was called BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China. South Africa was not part of the initial grouping, but later on South Africa joined as well. So BRIC became BRICS. And so coming back to the origin of the ASEAN countries, so basically all these 5 countries, they came together in 1967 to promote economic growth, social progress, cultural development in the Southeast Asia region through multilateral cooperation. Now, I would also like to mention something else. 1967 was a time when the Cold War between Soviet Union and the United States of America was at its zenith. Both the countries pretty much despised each other, and there were even threats of nuclear attacks on each other. The Cuban Missile Crisis was looming, and then there was also the Vietnam War, the infamous Vietnam War, where thousands of American soldiers died, and ultimately it resulted in an American loss. Yes, Vietnam War is actually considered a war that America lost, and the Vietnam War basically ripped Vietnam apart. 2 ideologies were fighting against each other. One side that supported US and the other side that supported communism, and the rest of the Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand and Philippines, and they clearly were not attracted to what Vietnam was going through. They wanted to stay away from such an external interference by a country that can push a country into a civil war and basically rip the whole country apart. They wanted peace, they wanted stability, and they also wanted to make sure that all the differences that the Southeast Asian countries have between them, they should be resolved in a peaceful manner, and trade between all these countries should be so much that war is simply not an option, conflict is simply not an option. So the leaders, the foreign ministers of these 5 countries, they gathered in Bangkok in 1967, and they came up with the Bangkok Declaration that ultimately led to the creation of the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations. Now I would also like to mention that there was at this time 1967 there was also a land dispute between Indonesia and Malaysia over the Borneo Island. The Borneo Island is the largest island in Asia, and it is basically divided into 3 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia and Brunei. So Indonesia and Malaysia, they had a certain dispute over a piece of land there. So that could actually have resulted in a much larger conflict as well had ASEAN not been in existence, because once ASEAN came to existence, both these countries decided to peacefully resolve the issue, and they decided to make sure that peace triumphs and trade triumphs. They wanted to make sure that both of them progress rather than both of them working day and night to destroy each other. Now let's talk about all the meetings that were held and all the agreements that were signed in the 2017 ASEAN Summit. Well, first of all, there was the ASEAN Economic Community Council meeting. Now again, ASEAN is basically an umbrella summit under which a lot of different meetings are held. So first of all, there was the ASEAN Economic Community Council meeting. Then there was the 16th ASEAN Political Security Council meeting. And then there was the 20th ASEAN Coordinating Council meeting as well. All right. And then of course, the Master Plan on ASEAN Connectivity 2025, its videos were released. Basically, this is a master plan to connect the ASEAN countries in a lot better way. They are already connected, of course. That is why they are so powerful together. Economically, they are so powerful. But the idea is to have better connectivity between the ASEAN countries, and it will involve a lot of planning. So that's why they came up with some videos. You can check them out on Google. You can just search them up, and you can see the master plan for the ASEAN countries. They have made some good graphics, and they show how ASEAN countries will rise further in 2025. And then the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Ministerial meeting was also held. More on this later. I have an MCQ at the end of this video. And then there was also the signing of the agreement of ASEAN Hong Kong Investment Agreement. All right, so there was this ASEAN Hong Kong Investment Agreement. Other than that, a very, very important thing, ASEAN and Hong Kong basically signed a free trade agreement as well. Not basically, they literally signed a free trade agreement, and you should remember this. They might ask in UPSC that ASEAN recently signed a free trade agreement with which of the following. So Hong Kong will be in the option, and you should probably tick that if you want that 1 mark. Now, if you look at India's role in ASEAN, in the ASEAN 2017 summit, well, first of all, India has completed 25 years of relations with ASEAN this year. And all the ASEAN country heads, the respective presidents and prime ministers, they have been invited for the 26th January parade of 2018, of course. And I think most of them have accepted the invitation in principle. And this was also the 15th India-ASEAN Summit. All right, so you might be wondering, some of you probably must be wondering that, all right, it's an ASEAN Summit, and all the other world leaders have arrived as well. But why do they have to go there? Why can't they just, send a representative? It is because that various countries have their own specific summits with the ASEAN countries during the ASEAN Summit. All right. So this was the 15th India-ASEAN Summit. That's why our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji went there. And according to the statement by the Ministry of External Affairs, the statement mentioned that the trade between India and ASEAN nations stood at a whopping $71 billion. That's almost as much as the trade that we have with China in 2016-17, and it basically comprises of 1/10 of India's total trade with the rest of the world, which is quite astounding. And they also said that the early conclusion of a balanced regional comprehensive economic partnership agreement, basically it is a free trade agreement between ASEAN and 6 other countries that ASEAN already has a free trade agreement with. So all the countries are working on a regional comprehensive economic partnership agreement with a huge free trade agreement between around 16 countries. I'll ask an MCQ about this later on in this video. So the idea is to boost trade and overall, just boost growth, boost investment, just boost everything. So this is basically what India did there in a nutshell. But our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji visited a very special place. You guys need to know about that. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji visited International Rice Research Institute in Philippines, Los Banos. It is not located in Manila, don't confuse it. It is around 65 kilometers away from Manila. And this institute is working towards developing better quality of rice seeds and addressing food scarcity issues. So what you need to know here is, first of all, the Indian Prime Minister visited the International Rice Research Institute. Where is it located? In Philippines, Los Banos. Most people probably think it is located in Europe or the US or something, but surprise, surprise, it is located in Philippines. And another thing that you should probably know about is that this Rice Research Institute is going to open up a South Asia branch as well. All right, Philippines is in Southeast Asia, India is in South Asia. So in South Asia, this institute will open a different branch specifically for South Asia, and that branch will be opened in India. All right, that branch will be in India and specifically in Varanasi. So you should know that the regional branch for the South Asia International Rice Research Institute will be in India, Varanasi. Now, if we talk about the bilateral talks, then Prime Minister Modi ji and US President Donald Trump held bilateral talks on the sidelines of the ASEAN Summit in Manila. Both the leaders discussed a range of key issues including defense and security. They have resolved that two of the world's greatest democracies should also have world's greatest military. So US and India are probably going to beef up the military cooperation in the near future. Other than that, 4 agreements were signed by India and Philippines. And they were in the areas of defense cooperation, logistics, agriculture, micro, medium and small enterprises, MSMEs, and forging closer relations between the Indian Council of World Affairs and the Philippines Foreign Affairs Institute. Other than that, Modi ji also held bilateral talks with his Australian counterpart, the Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. And in the brief meeting, both the sides exchanged views on mutual interest, including bilateral, regional and international issues. Now, one very important issue that everyone expected countries to talk about was the South China Sea. During the ASEAN Summit, people expected US, Japan, Australia, India, perhaps even the ASEAN countries themselves to say something about China's dominant role in the South China Sea and the way it is claiming the entire South China Sea as its own, or perhaps most of it as its own. Well, surprisingly, Philippines President Rodrigo, he made it clear that he will tolerate no statements against the People's Republic of China during the ASEAN Summit, and he will personally have absolutely no talk with any country regarding the South China Sea, because Philippines has pretty much accepted China's dominance in the South China Sea, and it has stated clearly that it will not oppose any of the moves that China is making in the South China Sea, and it will not be any part of a grouping that wishes to contain the People's Republic of China. So in ASEAN, we are actually seeing a rift between some countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos. They are against Chinese dominance in the South China Sea. They are trying to resist it. Whereas countries like Philippines and to some extent even Malaysia and Singapore, they are pretty much alright with Beijing's increasing dominance in the South China Sea, and they know that eventually China's navy will become so strong that it will be pointless to even give resistance to that. And they also know that the US is not serious enough to tackle the South China Sea issue and to actually stop China's influence in this region. So this ASEAN Summit was surprisingly a huge letdown for all the people who want to raise a voice against China's growing dominance in the South China Sea. Now, here is a very interesting MCQ for you guys. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership is a proposed free trade agreement between which of the following? Alright, now pause this video, attempt this question in the comment box below, then I will tell you the answer. The answer of this question is D, ASEAN plus 6 existing countries with which ASEAN already has a free trade agreement. So the Regional Economic Partnership RCEP is a proposed free trade agreement. It has not been, it is not in effect right now, between 10 members of the ASEAN countries, Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, and the 6 states with which ASEAN already has free trade agreements, that is Australia, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and New Zealand. The final MCQ of this great video by me, yours truly Prashant Dhawan, is who is the General Secretary of ASEAN? Lee Leong Mi, or Lee Leong Mi, or Richard Lee, or Chris J. Rico, or they don't really have a General Secretary in ASEAN? Well, the answer is A, Lee Leong Mi. Alright, so he is the General Secretary of ASEAN, and yeah, this is the end of our great video. Thank you for watching. I will probably see you next year when they have the ASEAN Summit in 2018. See you then, and God bless you all.